Jonathan Hale was not your typical millionaire. He wasn't born into wealth. He built his empire brick by brick, sacrificing friendships and time in the process. Now, at 42, with a sprawling mansion and a company worth billions, he found himself haunted by a strange emptiness. That was until he noticed Maria. Maria had worked as his maid for over a year. She was polite, efficient, and oddly mysterious. She never lingered, never chatted unnecessarily, and always wore the same humble expression. Jonathan barely noticed her, until the day he accidentally saw her reflection in the hallway mirror. She was smiling, not the kind of smile you wear when dusting a billionaire's furniture. It was pure, radiant, almost free. The image stuck in Jonathan's mind. Who was she really? Why did a maid wear a smile so full of life when she returned to the shadows of invisibility in his home? That evening, as Maria clocked out at precisely 6 p.m., Jonathan found himself doing something he'd never imagined. He followed her. Keeping a safe distance in his sleek black SUV, he watched her board an old city bus. No phone in hand, no distractions, just stillness. She got off in a rough neighborhood, a place far removed from Jonathan's polished world. He parked quietly and waited, heart unexpectedly pounding. She disappeared into a narrow alleyway, and what happened next made him grip the steering wheel tightly. Music, laughter, voices. Jonathan got out and slowly approached. What he saw made him freeze. Maria was on a small stage, microphone in hand, surrounded by children in ragged clothes. Her voice echoed like hope in the dark. Jonathan's world tilted. This maid. She was more than he ever imagined. The building Maria entered looked like an abandoned warehouse from the outside, but inside it pulsed with life. Jonathan stood near the doorway, unnoticed, stunned by the transformation. String lights dangled across the ceiling, children sat cross-legged on the floor, and art pieces, painted on cardboard and canvas scraps, decorated the walls. It wasn't just a shelter, it was a sanctuary. Maria stood in the center, reading aloud a story. Her voice was gentle, warm. The children hung on every word, their eyes wide with admiration. Jonathan leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. How had she hidden this world from everyone? After the reading, Maria helped serve food, simple but hot. She moved with purpose, comforting the smallest ones and encouraging the shyest. Jonathan recognized something unfamiliar in her, leadership. A volunteer spotted Jonathan and approached cautiously. "Can I help you, sir?" Caught off guard, he mumbled, "Just waiting for someone." The man nodded, but didn't seem convinced. Jonathan left quietly, his thoughts spinning. Why was she doing this? Was she financing it herself on a maid's salary? The next day, Jonathan couldn't concentrate at work. His mind kept replaying the scene, the laughter, the joy, Maria's quiet strength. He tried to ask her casually during lunch, "So, do you ever sing or speak in public?" Maria looked up, surprised. "Not really," she replied softly. "Just for some kids sometimes." Jonathan didn't push. He now knew there was much more she wasn't saying. That evening, he followed her again and again. Each night she returned to the same place, teaching, cleaning, feeding, inspiring. Maria wasn't a maid, she was a guardian of forgotten children. Jonathan's heart, long armored by success, began to soften. He wasn't sure why, but he knew this story wasn't over. Not yet. Days turned into weeks. Jonathan became obsessed, not in a possessive way, but with a curiosity that gnawed at his soul. Who was Maria before she became his maid? Where did she learn to lead like that? Why didn't she ask for help? He made a decision. One afternoon, while she was at work, Jonathan accessed her employment file. It was thin, no emergency contact, no former employers listed, just a reference from a shelter and an address. The address matched the same neighborhood he'd followed her to. That evening he returned, but this time not as a stalker in the shadows. He stepped through the door as a guest. The children screamed in delight when they saw him. Apparently Maria had told them stories about her rich boss and how clumsy he was. Jonathan laughed awkwardly, realizing she'd painted him as harmless. Maria looked stunned. "Mr. Hale, what are you doing here?" He raised a hand. "Just Jonathan. And I'm here to help." She looked skeptical. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I think what you're doing is incredible, and I want to understand it." Slowly, Maria nodded. "Then you'll have to get your hands dirty." That night, Jonathan washed dishes, wiped floors, and listened to heartbreaking stories from children who had seen too much. He learned their names, their fears, their dreams. Maria watched him closely, not judging, just observing. As the evening ended, she handed him a worn photo of a young boy. "My brother," she said quietly. He died in the system. No one fought for him, so now I fight for them. Jonathan held the photo gently, a lump forming in his throat. This wasn't charity, this was redemption, and he was beginning to need it just as much as the children did. Jonathan couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the photo of Maria's brother and the pain behind her eyes. The next morning, instead of heading straight to the office, he went back to the shelter. Maria was surprised, but she didn't send him away. Each evening after work, Jonathan joined her. He painted walls, read stories, served food. The children began to adore him. He wasn't the billionaire in a suit anymore. He was Uncle John, the clumsy helper with a kind smile. One night, while they stacked donated books, Jonathan asked, "Why keep this all a secret? You could get help, grants, attention." Maria replied, "Because attention can also bring danger. Some of the kids, they're hiding from more than poverty." Jonathan understood. Some scars weren't physical. He respected her need for silence, but was determined to help in a meaningful way. He had his assistant discreetly research her past. What he found shocked him. Maria had once been a law student, top of her class, but after her brother's death in foster care, she dropped out. She sued the state, but the case was buried. Her reputation tarnished. She vanished. Jonathan confronted her gently. "Why didn't you tell me?" Maria looked away. "Because I didn't want pity. I wanted purpose." Jonathan didn't reply. He now realized Maria had more strength than anyone he'd ever met. Later that night, he sat alone in his study, staring at the city lights. He had money, influence, a massive corporation. But Maria? She had power, real power, the kind that changes lives quietly, without applause. And he wanted to be a part of that world. Not as a savior, but as a student. Something in him had changed, and it was only the beginning. One morning, Jonathan called Maria into his office. She looked confused, dressed in her cleaning uniform, her hands still dusty from polishing. "I have an offer," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "If this is about a raise," he smiled. "It's not. I want to fund the shelter, expand it, buy a better building, hire staff, doctors, teachers." Maria blinked, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because I believe in what you're doing," he replied. "And because I want to build something that matters, not just profits. People." She hesitated. "And what do you want in return?" Jonathan paused. "Nothing." "Well, maybe just one thing. Let me learn from you." Her gaze softened, but she wasn't quick to say yes. "You don't get to throw money and expect everything to be solved. These kids need more than buildings. They need love, consistency, safety." "I understand," he nodded. "That's why I want your leadership." For the first time, Maria smiled, not the maid's polite smile, but one filled with trust. They spent the next month planning. Jonathan transferred funds discreetly. Maria found an old community center and converted it into a dream space, classrooms, beds, a clinic. Volunteers poured in. Former street kids became mentors. Word spread. The shelter was reborn as the Lantern House, a place where lost children found light again. At the opening ceremony, Maria stood in front of a crowd. Cameras flashed, city officials applauded, but her eyes found Jonathan. "None of this would have happened if someone hadn't seen me. Not as a maid, but as a human." Jonathan clapped the loudest. In that moment, both their lives, once so distant, had become deeply intertwined, and neither of them would ever be the same. Success, as it often does, came with shadows. Within weeks of the Lantern House's launch, Jonathan began receiving calls from board members, investors, even his own family. "Why are you wasting company money on street kids?" one investor demanded. "You've gone soft," sneered another. "Stick to business, not charity." Jonathan ignored them, at first. But the pressure mounted. Stocks dipped slightly. Rumors spread. Journalists began digging into Maria's past. One morning, headlines screamed, "Maid turned activist hiding dark past. Billionaire involved?" Maria was devastated. The shelter's front door had graffiti the next day, "Liar." She packed her things and tried to leave. Jonathan stopped her. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "They'll ruin you," she whispered. He stepped closer. "Let them try." The next day, Jonathan held a press conference. Cameras swarmed as he stood at the podium. "I am Jonathan Hale, and yes, I've funded a shelter run by the most courageous woman I've ever met. Maria lost her brother to a system that failed him. Now she's saving others. If you call that a scandal, then maybe the world needs more scandals." The video went viral. Suddenly, Maria wasn't a target, she was a hero. Donations flooded in. Volunteers tripled. Even the city mayor showed support. The same media that once questioned her now praised her. But Jonathan knew this wasn't about redemption or headlines. It was about conviction. Later that night, Maria stood beside him on the Lantern House rooftop, gazing at the stars. "You didn't have to stand up for me," she said. "I didn't do it for you," he replied. "I did it because I finally found something worth standing for." In the soft city breeze, two unlikely lives began to beat with the same purpose. And they weren't finished yet. Months passed. The Lantern House expanded into nearby buildings. A mobile health van was added. Evening literacy classes were introduced for teenagers and single mothers. Every corner hummed with new life. Maria, once hidden in silence, was now known as Mama M to dozens of children. She was fierce, protective, loving, and never let her past define her. Jonathan's transformation was equally striking. He delegated most of his corporate duties to trusted executives. His luxury lifestyle still existed, but his heart belonged elsewhere now. He still wore designer suits, but they often had paint stains or crayon marks on them. One afternoon, a little girl named Eleni tugged on Jonathan's coat. "Are you Maria's husband?" He laughed. "No, just her student." Eleni squinted. "You mean you don't love her?" Jonathan paused. That night he sat with Maria in the kitchen of the Lantern House as kids slept upstairs. "You've changed everything," he said. She smiled. "So have you. I don't want to just fund this. I want to be a part of it forever." Maria looked at him, heart pounding. "I'm not asking for marriage or promises," he said. "Just your trust, and maybe a chance." Tears welled in her eyes. "I think you've already earned it." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. In that moment, the weight of loss, loneliness, and long-forgotten dreams lifted, just enough for love to bloom in the cracks. A year later, a documentary was released titled The Maid Who Changed a Millionaire. It received awards, but more importantly, it inspired communities across the country to create safe spaces for children. Maria was invited to speak at universities, conferences, even Congress, but she never left the Lantern House. Jonathan stayed by her side, not as her savior, but as her equal. One evening, a reporter asked Jonathan, "What made you follow her that night?" He thought for a long moment. "I saw her smile, not at me, not for me, but for something real, and I needed to know what made someone so free." "And what did you discover?" He smiled. "That true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's in courage, in healing, in love." The Lantern House thrived, but more importantly, so did its people. Former orphans became doctors, teachers, artists. Kids who once knew nothing but fear now grew up believing in second chances. Maria often said, "We didn't rescue them, they rescued us." On the anniversary of the shelter's opening, the children painted a mural. At the center was a figure in a suit holding hands with a woman in a red apron surrounded by stars. Above it, 3 words were written in bold: "We found home." And for Jonathan and Maria, once from worlds so far apart, that was the truest discovery of all.